Broadcasting the information the mainstream media won't touch. This is The Richie Allen Show in association with DavidIke.com.
Time to welcome our final guest. He's a special guy. He joined us back in early December last year, and we loved him. And it's about time he came back. You can catch him on his blog. He's a prolific writer. He's at hendersonlefthook.wordpress.com, but he's also the author of several acclaimed books on geopolitics and also on international finance. You'll see him on RT Press TV. He's a regular columnist for Veterans Today and Rents.com. You often hear him on Rents. He's been on InfoWars more times than we've had hot dinners. He's a really, really well-briefed man. Always a pleasure to hear him. And it's a real pleasure to welcome him back for the second time to this programme. It's our friend Dean Henderson. Dean, welcome back. How are you?
I'm great, Richie. Thanks for that nice introduction.
You're very welcome. Listen, are you not sick to death of primaries being contested by multi-millionaires and multi-billionaire lawyers? Because they all are, regardless of how nice they might seem. You know, and some of the things they say, we can all agree with something Trump says and Sanders says, but ultimately they're all slaves to Zionism, aren't they? They're all saying that as soon as they get in, they'll pay homage to Netanyahu in Israel and invite him over. Paul Craig Roberts on this show a couple of weeks back saying, Richie, imagine we're living in this world where we give billions of dollars to the Israelis and they use that money to buy our elections. Are you not sick of it by this stage?
Well, honestly, Richie, I would be, but I'm a huge Bernie Sanders supporter, actually. And, you know, Bernie's the only guy, even though he's Jewish, he didn't go to AIPAC. He doesn't bow before him. In the last debate with Hillary, he went out of his way to say the Palestinians were being ill-treated. He's condemned the bombing of Gaza many times. The Israeli government doesn't like him at all. And he's raising, you know, his whole campaign is $27 average donation from citizens. He doesn't take any corporate money, any banker money, any Zionist money. So he's the real deal. He was born in Brooklyn. His mom, you know, never did move out of this rent control apartment that she dreamt of moving out of. I mean, he grew up poor, you know. So he's not a Zionist. He's Jewish, but he's definitely not a Zionist. They hate him. And so for that reason, I'm not sick of him because I still think Bernie's going to win it. And Bernie is the guy that's going to bring in, $15 an hour minimum wage, federal, just, you know, is one of the things he's wanting to do. And he'll get it done because he's also a guy that's not politically correct. He doesn't care what people think of him. He's just going to, if the Republicans block the 15, he'll just executive order it, done. And it's not the perfect form of government when you have to do that, but Reagan, Bush, all the Republicans, they're the ones that started all this stuff, and they just deregulated everything and gave everything to the bankers and corporations. So Bernie's not going to be afraid to use that veto pen or that executive order pen. And we can get things done. We have to think big, and he thinks big. He wants an infrastructure program. He wants free college for every American, free health care for every American, stop all this crazy war stuff everywhere, close down the Cayman Islands and all these tax havens. Yeah. You know, a lot of good stuff, really. So,
and I sympathise with much of that.
I would be sick of it, but I really think he's the real deal, and I really do support him.
I sympathise with a lot of what he's had to say, as I would sympathise and agree with a lot of what Jeremy Corbyn has to say.
Right.
But I had a fascinating conversation with David Icke last Monday, and David is they don't get much nicer and much more rational than David when it comes to talking about these things. You don't get any, you don't get any kind of exactly. David, I mean, from the word go, David said, look, he said, from the word go, David said, you know, you look at Corbyn and you look at Sanders, and you know, it's good for a change to hear somebody in politics saying the sorts of things they're saying. But David has demonstrated, I think, recently better than I could, and I was talking a lot about this, but I couldn't phrase it as well as he put it. And he said, these guys, Richie, they're ultimately produced by the system, regardless of whether they want to be or not. And ultimately, whenever they get anywhere near power or around power, or they ascend to a position of power, they ultimately get vibrated into the system. And they don't get to do what it is. Now, Corbyn's a great example of that.
It's tough. It's really tough. Believe me, I ran for Congress in 2004, and even just running and winning the Dem primary, you start feeling that pressure that you're talking about, you know, and all you got to do is certain things, and they'll pay you a lot of money. But, you know, there's some people that just doesn't affect. Didn't affect me, and it doesn't affect Bernie. I really don't think it does. And he's just old. He's like, what is he? I don't know. He's old, and he's just tired of it. And he's always, I mean, I don't know if you realize it, but when the Patriot Act passed in the U.S., it passed 99-1.
He voted against it.
And he was the one vote. Yeah, even back then. So he's always voted for stuff that had no chance of passing. He's always been this fringe guy, this kind of, all the media treat him like some goof, but I mean, he's a real radical. He's a revolutionary. He uses the word, we need a political revolution. That's his kind of slogan. And he means it. And it is a revolution because, I mean, 900 people have been arrested in D.C. in the last week, which the mainstream media hasn't reported at all. But it's called Democracy Spring. There's something big going on. And it's all Bernie people. And we're just sick of this crap. And Trump's a fascist. And they ran him out of Chicago. They were beating up fascists in Chicago. Black Lives Matter, Bernie people, because they're sick of this crap, you see. So the left's got some muscle, too, as far as if we need it. We don't want to go there. But it's like, look, man, you think you're some tough little fascist? This ain't going to happen here, Richie. This ain't going to happen in America. We've seen we've seen this video before. We've seen this movie before. And, honestly, it's the only time, and I'm 50 years old, it's the only time in my life where I feel like we actually have a chance to elect somebody that that you're not talking about.
I hate to depress you.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
99% of them are like that. 99.9% of them are like that. But I just think Sanders is fundamentally different. I can't really speak to Corbyn. I don't know him that well. I've heard good things about him. Maybe he's got some, but you try to find dirt on Bernie here. He just doesn't take their money. He never has. And that's the key. And so he's learned to navigate it. He's wrote a lot of legislation. He's been very active congressman and senator. And has actually done some really good things when he could. But usually he didn't have the votes because his stuff's too radical.
Let me read a few quick tweets. Martin Noakes was on to say, let me just get through these and then you can come straight back in, Dean. Martin was on to say, Bernie Sanders is the Trojan horse. Of course he's a Zionist, says Martin, but actually he has no chance of winning. It's Hillary's gift. Now, Funk Soul on Twitter says, I disagree. Sanders will not do everything he says. Free education and free healthcare. We need to be realistic. Now, that gets us back to money. We'll come back to the Federal Reserve in a minute. JP is in Manchester and he says, Ron Paul said that all elections are rigged, just like the UK has been doing since Blair. The civil service never changes. And we'll come to rigged elections shortly. But I do want to take you up on the point there that Funk Soul on Twitter has mentioned. Supposing Bernie Sanders is sincere, and I like to believe that the guy, has a conscience and the guy has empathy and sympathy with the poor and would like to do things, in a fairer way. I like to believe that, the same as I like to believe Corbyn means it. But the first thing Sanders would have to do, Dean, in that, in terms of free education, free healthcare, he would have to fund that. And one of the ways he would have to fund it, now I'm not going to go down the bullshit raise taxes, I'm not going to go down that road, but he would have to borrow money from a private central bank that will invent it out of thin air and will put an even more massive debt on the American people going forward. How would he do that?
Well, actually, Richie, and he talks about this again, you probably don't get the debates over there and stuff and get to watch them, but he talks about how he would fund his education and healthcare. It's all about closing down offshore tax havens. Like General Electric, Halliburton, they paid no federal income tax last year. Before the fraudulent income tax was introduced in 1917, same year as the Federal Reserve, same year as the Rockefeller General Education Board was founded so they could social engineer our minds. Same year, a lot of stuff. It was all just basically East India Company and all the mercantilist British companies paid the bills here, and the Rockefellers, oil companies, and then they introduced the income tax. So it's wrong. So he's going to pay for the education by doing that, by shutting down the offshore stuff, bringing it home, and then he's going to pay for the healthcare by putting a surcharge on all Wall Street trades, like every transaction. So like a little trader, like, if you or I dabble in the stock market, which I don't at all because I saw rigged and you probably don't either, but, person anyway, they're going to trade 2-3 times a year maybe or whatever. It's going to be 50 cents a trade they'll be paying. But a hedge fund or Goldman Sachs is going to make 1 million trades in a week or something, and they're going to pay a lot, and that's going to go to pay for their healthcare. So he talks about how he can fund this without raising taxes. He'll raise taxes a little bit on the sort of upper middle class, but they'll actually save money because they'll get free healthcare. They won't have to pay any healthcare, including the employers won't have to pay healthcare for their employees anymore because it's going to be single payer. So he's got ideas that don't involve any debt, and he also talks about breaking up the banks. I mean, that's a big, huge theme of his campaign, which in essence, Richie, he's talking about breaking up the Federal Reserve. Because if you break up J.P. Morgan Chase into J.P. Morgan, Chase Manhattan, Morgan Guarantee Trust, Chemical Bank, Manufacturers Hanover, all of which used to be separate companies, you're in essence breaking up the New York Fed. If you break up Bank of America and Wells Fargo into the companies, and Citigroup is another New York bank, but then you break up the San Francisco Fed. So he's quietly saying he's going to break up the Fed without taking a bullet, is the way I look at it. But he's breaking up the Fed. I mean, Richie, this guy's going to break up the Fed. So, that's not playing ball with these guys, in my opinion. And I just have to disagree. And I do this, and I know a lot of people in the kind of conspiracy world, they don't trust Sanders. They think he's a Trojan horse. But you just got to look at his record. You just got to look as he didn't go to APAC. He was the only guy. He offered to do a video conference. They didn't want it. Why? Because they don't like him either. And there's a reason for that, because his policies are not congruent with monopoly capitalism. They're just not.
Do you know what it is, Dean?
He says he's a socialist. He's a democratic socialist. Okay, so that's what it is. So, and Americans are actually growing up. I think that's why he's getting so much support. And yet, the more important, I think, comment from your first tweet was he doesn't have a chance to win. The guy says, whoever this guy was that tweeted. And that's what you have to ask yourself. But why doesn't he have it? Yes, they're rigging this election. Hillary stole Iowa. She stole Nevada. She stole Massachusetts. She stole Arizona. She has stole Missouri. She's stolen a lot of states. Yes, they're rigging this election. All these super delegates and all these stupid rules. Yes. And still, Bernie Sanders has a chance. The media is ignoring him. Why are they ignoring him? You have to ask yourself, why are they ignoring him? Why does the mainstream media ignore this guy, or just say he doesn't have a chance?
Can I answer for the mainstream media, Dean?
Because they don't like him.
Let me
dangerous.
Let me answer for the mainstream media, because I'm absolutely prepared to take the slings and arrows. I have nothing against him or Corbyn. It's not him. It's not Corbyn. It's the system. What I've been saying to people for years is, and I believe this as much as I believe, in the hand that I can see in front of my face. I believe, Dean, we are condemned to a tyranny that is getting worse by the day unless we shun the system. I don't believe the answer to the misery lies within the political establishment. No matter how nice a guy like Bernie Sanders is, and I like listening to Bernie Sanders, sometimes I like listening to Corbyn, but I don't believe the system, people say the system is okay, it's just we've always had the wrong people in it. I say no. What we need is non-violent civil disobedience. I mean, we need to tear down the walls of the establishment, including the major pillars like democracy, like elections. It just doesn't work, Dean.
No, that's right. And that's why the Democratic convention is going to be interesting. And I've applied to be a at-large delegate for Sanders, and I'll be there. So, I mean, it could get interesting. It could be like the 68 convention or something crazy. Because I'm telling you, people are in a revolutionary mood in America. I know we're always been the dumbest people and the last to wake up, and because we live in this belly of the beast, this empire, this Hessianized mercenary force for the Rothschild London bankers who control us, and people don't know they control us. So they love the British, and I love you, Richie. But, honestly, it's just this Anglophile shit, that we get every day. We're supposed to love the British. Well, why is that? Well, because the city of London runs stuff. That's why. And and Israel the same way. But the Israel thing's wearing off. People really don't like Israel much here anymore. It's amazing to be in America at this time, because it's not just Bernie Sanders. I look at Bernie Sanders, and I know what you mean. And the system's all rigged. He talks all about the establishment and how we have to have a revolution. It's all rigged. We got to just fundamentally bust it up and start over, kind of. And I know that. But on the other hand, you do have these young kids who are behind him. That's who's behind him. Because why? Because they have no hope. Because they're $50,000 in college student loan debt. They can't pay it back. There's no jobs that pay more than $8-10 an hour. I mean, they have no hope. We've outsourced all of our manufacturing to India, Mexico, China. They have no hope. And that's who's behind Bernie Sanders. And it is a revolution. And it is done all different, where he's raising more than Hillary Clinton by going on the internet and getting $27 a person instead of any corporate money. None. Zero. He goes to the Vatican, meets with the Pope. She goes to George Clooney's dinner and $350,000 dinner in L.A. Quite a contrast. But that's just who he is. And I like the Pope, too, by the way. Even though the Vatican, we know the history. But I'm telling you, there's just something going on, and our awareness is actually taking hold, is what I'm seeing, Richie, is that the things we've been talking about, finally, people, it's sinking in a little bit. And I actually have quite a great deal of hope right now, and I don't think it's misguided. I'm pretty pragmatic, but it's an exciting time to kind of be in America, I think. And even just to have a chance of a guy like Sanders winning, because we had Jesse Jackson, he was a great guy. I worked for him. We had Jerry Brown. I go in and out of politics when, usually, yes. I mean, it's just like rigged, and sometimes I don't vote. But when there's a good person running, I will, and then I'll go to the mile for him and I'll work for him. I went to Bernie knocking on doors in Des Moines in February before the Iowa primary, or the caucus. Got sick up there, but I mean, you have to. Politics is just. I mean, it's all we got. Even as screwed up as it is, okay, democracy is all we got. And yes, it's bought and paid for by the corporate Rothschild people. Yes, all owned and paid for. Both parties, almost all the members of Congress, because you have to have money to get elected because, Citizens United, blah, blah, blah. But it's still all we got, democracy. I mean,
well, some of my best friends agree.
We can elect people, or we can just go back to where families rule us like they did in England, and why we came here and got the out of there. But there's a third way, Dean. There is a third way. I want to get off this anyway because there's so much to get into. What I do want to do is give a right and proper plug. Folks, go to hendersonlefthook.wordpress.com. I've had the pleasure of reading Dean's books, Big Oil and Their Bankers in the Persian Gulf. It's fantastic. The Federal Reserve Cartel, Sticking It to the Matrix, The Grateful Unrich, all the books are there. hendersonlefthook.wordpress.com, and some terrifically written, challenging and engaging articles as well. You'll agree with a lot of what Dean says. Some of it you won't agree with. I think it's never been more important than now to engage with people whom we like, but whom we maybe disagree with, because one of the things we were speaking about in the first hour was one of the great effects the internet has had on us, particularly social media, where we now spend much of our time trying to affirm and confirm our opinions online rather than actually having a debate with people. I tell you what, Dean, I have the utmost respect for your enthusiasm for Sanders. Some of my closest friends say to me that exactly what you said. Politics is the only thing we have at the moment. We got to do the best with what we have while we try and change it. I just fundamentally disagree, and I've just completely turned my back on it. We could talk about that till we're here all night. I know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah,
I respect it too equally, and it's just a choice we got to make. But it's bad, I just know things are bad, and if we don't do something pretty fast, there's all kinds of stuff. The Ring of Fire is going off, and the economy's about to melt down globally, and the dark star is near. I mean, it's pretty interesting times. But the way I see it, whether you engage politics, you do it another way. I mean, we also live out here off the land. We go to town once a week. We cut wood. We have a huge garden. We raise animals sometimes, and we do try to unplug from the system. Trust me, as much. I probably do it more than anyone. Well, I do it more than anyone I know. I don't know anyone else that I know that goes to town once a week. I just don't.
Yeah.
I don't. And so I am living that too. I just want to dig what you're saying. It's true that you don't ever put your whole thing. Like, I don't put my whole thing on Sanders because they'll probably get screwed in the end anyway, and they'll get rigged, and we'll have Hillary and whatever. But I am excited about it. But my grounding is right here at the end of the road, and on my place, and dropping out of the system, which I did a long time ago. So I totally understand what you're saying. I just want you to, know.
Absolutely. Mike V on Twitter agrees with Dean. Got to say, I agree with Dean. We need to give Sanders and Corbyn a chance. Revolution if they don't deliver. Otherwise, we just despair. We don't vote, and we end up with successions of Conservative and Republican governments, says Mike V on Twitter. Thanks. Keep those tweets coming in to @RichieAllenShow as well. Lots and lots and lots and lots of tweets. Email richie@richieallen.co.uk. At the apex of all of this, Dean, and again, it's something you've been writing about and talking about for years. David Icke's been writing about it since the early 1990s, and that is the creation of money. Those who control the creation of money, and of course it's a small cartel, as you go into in the Federal Reserve Cartel. I can't recommend that highly enough, by the way. Go to hendersonlefthook.wordpress.com. This is where the control really is, Dean. And I'm reminded of Mayor Amschel Rothschild's famous statement in 1868 or sometime like that, 1848. I don't care who rules a nation, as long as you give me control of the money supply.
Yeah, that's pretty much it, Richie. And, they figured out this a long time ago that and I read a Rothschild biography, read quite a few of them. I think this one was Niels Ferguson, but they call it creating daylight out of magic. Creating this money, and that's what they call it. And it's just because it does involve esoteric things too, the Freemasons, the Muslim Brotherhood, the apex of that's the Illuminati, Satanism. It does involve, it's spiritual warfare, but it's just sort of it's the ultimate exploitation when you can take a government, just hijack it, even have it pay for the printing and engraving of the coins and currency, the paper and the coin, and then somehow it's yours to just lend out and put this country over here anyway, like 25 trillion in debt, most of which is owed to the 8 families that control the New York Federal Reserve, 52% of it. And that's the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, the Lazards, who were the bankers for Kennedy, the Warburgs, who were the bankers for Hitler, the Kuhn Loebs, the Israel Moses Saifs, the Lehmans. The Lehman interest actually has been somewhat taken over by the Oppenheimer family, which is, if there's a 9th family, that would be it. And they're sort of merging. They sort of merged. But anyway, just the fact that, and they own 52% of the New York Fed. And the New York Fed, just to explain, is constituted of the big banks that dominate the New York banking sector. It's pretty simple. It's not some far out conspiracy. It's just the way it is. The Federal Reserve is a private operation of the banks that it consists of. So it just so happens that JP Morgan Chase and Citigroup are huge banks. And so they control the New York Fed, which is really the only Fed that matters because, first of all, the 3rd sub-basement of the New York Fed is the biggest supply of gold in the world, probably confiscated from Fort Knox, probably confiscated from Germany and other places, as collateral. And also the fact that the FOMC, the Federal Open Market Committee, meets there, to decide interest rates. The only thing federal government about the Federal Reserve is the Federal Reserve Board of Governors, which is appointed, but it's just bankers, former bankers, whatever. So it's totally private. It's totally fraudulent. They've put us in all this debt, and yet, like my book Big Oil talks about, they still control the war machine. They control the arms trade, the oil companies, which I call the 4 horsemen: ExxonMobil, Chevron, Texaco, BP, Amoco, and Royal Dutch Shell. Those are the 4 horsemen. They own oil all the way from the Saudi wellhead to your gas pump, although they are selling gas stations now into this low price environment. They're also going to pick up a lot of bankrupt frackers and Bakken, all that North Dakota oil stuff. They're going to go bankrupt, and these big 4 horsemen will swoop it all up. That's part of what this oil crash is about. And they control the drug trade as well. The Colombia and Afghanistan, and with their gray wolves buddies in Turkey, running it through there. And so they're hegemons, and they need to be named by name. And that's really the important thing, I think, to talk about.
Let me ask you this then, because this is brilliant stuff, by the way. Folks, our guest is Dean Henderson, hendersonlefthook.wordpress.com. Dean has just named the secret rulers of the universe, the secret rulers of the world, the JP Morgans, the Rockefellers, the Warburgs, the Oppenheimers, the Rothschilds, of course.
I miss Goldman Sachs, by the way.
Goldman Sachs, of course. So what you have here is, do you have sympathy with some of my learned listeners who say, Dean, that if we can educate the masses with this information, I think it was Ford who said that if people knew, if they knew how the money supply worked, or if they knew how money worked, there'd be a revolution. Does that still hold true today? If you can get that information to enough people, would there be a revolution?
I think so. I think that's the key, and I think that's the one single issue, because they got us all scattered out. Their whole thing is divide people, so they're always dividing people every chance they get, whether it's race or gender or where you live, or but ideas and single issue. You take that issue, then we'll put this, and then we'll give grant money to those groups, so we'll keep them going. So we'll reinforce that, and that'll be social engineering. But it's all this single issue crap. It doesn't connect. A lot of egos. People doing, and this is the issue. Because why? Because 25 trillion in debt. Not just the U.S., but every country is in debt to these same parasites. They're financial parasites, is what they are. And from that comes all the war, all the environmental destruction, all the social engineering and brainwashing of our kids through their media monopoly. all the sickness, the death industry, the cancer that they create, all the vaccines, just everything nasty emanates from these people. And they are Satanists. My God, they're Satanists. I mean, hey, they're Satanists. I mean, it's not, I'm not a crazy guy.
No, we've seen pictures.
It's the truth that we have to report it.
Dean,
Right?
hang on a second.
Right.
Hang on a second. No, this is really important. I'm glad you brought this up. We've seen pictures in books that go back decades and decades. Old society annuals, pictures taken at balls and dinners. These fuckers are Satanists. We see old photographs of them in the costumes, don't we? This is absolutely true.
Malek.
Imagine it.
It's not something we're making up. But the reason it's so hard, I think, to get it across, one of the reasons, Richie, is that 99.9% of people are good people. Okay. And more importantly, they want to believe that all people, are good people. And they just can't get their sort of intellectual head around, or even their heart or the spirit around the fact that there's this kind of 0.001% that are just satanic, lizard, bloodthirsty pedophiles. They just can't get their heads around that. And it's tough, I know. And I know for everybody, right? When you first hear this, you're like, wow. But we have to face it. I think that's the key, is we have to face it. And we face it head on through the Federal Reserve, Bank of England, Bundesbank. It's all the central banks they own, not just the Fed, right? And we have to hit it head on. And because that takes out their financial monopoly, it also takes out their spiritual power. When you throw these people in jail, it all goes away. And we need to enough is enough.
You've said something extraordinary there. David says to me all the time, privately, as well as when he comes on air, that the system has deliberately targeted people's sense of what is and what isn't possible. And that's why, it's one of the reasons why people don't buy, into the scale of the paedophilia and all that. And I think David is right, but I think you're equally right. I think when you're decent, fundamentally deep down decent, and you look after your family and you take care of people and you're nice, you can't fathom that people could be so sick. I think you hit the nail on the head, Dean.
It's kind of scary for people. So
yeah, how can anybody do that? How can anybody rape children?
Bridge, I don't know how we get them to cross that bridge. But I think it's really about, because all that's tied up with the fear. And that's why, and there is an element of fear about not crossing that bridge. Like, I don't want to look at it, but it's I always say it's like I used to live in Montana for 10 years in the Northern Rockies, the most grizzly bears in the lower 48, right? So we camp with grizzly bears a lot. If you see a grizzly running down the trail at you up in the Bob Marshall Wilderness, what are you going to do? I mean, are you going to just pretend it's not there? Or are you going to deal with it? So that's the same with these people. You can't pretend it's not there. If presented the information, no matter how hard it is, you have to step up. So there's also an element of sort of this, we got soft and we live in an empire and people just want to be entertained and have it easy and they don't want to deal with the hard questions. And this is a hard question, but it has to be dealt with. So there's some of that too. But it's really, it is, how do we get through that barrier? How do we get people across the bridge? How do we get them to be more brave, courageous? And it ultimately comes down to loving themselves, I think. Like, people don't love themselves enough. They're just giving themselves all kinds of shit all the time. It's my fault for this and that. Well, that's the main thing the system does to people. That's the main
self-loathing,
thing.
Yeah. Self-loathing.
Because if they can knock that out, you can't love anyone else. You can't give a damn about any issues or anything. You can't really be effective. And you're always going to be scared. And you're always going to be trying to win approval from people instead of doing the right thing, which is a lot different than trying to win approval from people.
We have a tweet for you, my friend. It's from my editor, Simon. Simon edits the YouTube channel. Richie, ask Dean if there's any truth in the rumour or the claim that Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg is a grandson of David Rockefeller. Is there any truth to that, or is that just one of those silly internet things that, kind of grabbed people and it isn't true? What do you think?
It's the first I've heard of it, and I just made a little note here.
Yeah.
Thanks for the tip.
Something to look into, yeah.
I tell you what, Facebook is the modern-day equivalent of the Rockefeller General Education Board because it's a giant social engineering project is what it is. to sort of herd people into these sort of mass positions of consensus that are pretty soft and not really getting to the heart of it, but it makes you feel good if you're a liberal, anti-fracking, or if you're conservative, anti-something else, gays, but it's like, again, it's frazzled, single issue, dividing, and then it's all the likes, and it's like a Skinner box, it's like pull a lever, get a like. So it's like this massive, heavy, I think social media is anti-social media, basically. Like you said before, we don't have debates, we don't talk to people face to face, we don't get out in the streets as much, probably, and just protest and just hang out at a coffee shop and have a conversation because everybody's on their phone at the coffee shop. You can't even, it's crazy. So this is the downside. Now, of course, there's a lot of upside to internet. Here we're doing it right now. But it's a tool. It's a hammer. You put it back in the shop when you're done, and you can't just be hanging out on it. And you have to, I think, be aware of what they're trying to do to us. They censor my stuff all the time, man. They make it so hard just to share my stuff. And people tell me all the time that, they go there and it's blank. And they're totally engineering us. So I don't know. It's for me, it's just a way to get my stuff out. But I really hate it. I really hate Facebook. And it wouldn't surprise me a bit if Zuckerberg is a Rockefeller. Not a bit.
How interesting. How interesting. Paul was back on to say, yes, he's named the people that control the world, but there is an entity that controls them, says Paul. Paul has a lot of sympathy with what David Icke has been writing for years, as do I. Graham Lawrence says, this guy Dean is brilliant. Great choice, I guess, Richie. Sue, who's a Starlighter lady on Twitter, says, Dean is spot on. Great guest. You're getting a lot of love, Dean. A lot of love for Dean.
Thanks for that, you guys. And and that first guy's right. There is a power beyond it. I agree with it totally. This is a spiritual battle. Right now, the way I look at, the devil or whatever, the Anunnaki, whoever, they control the earth. It's the devil's earth, man. Everything about it's unjust, and everything about it needs to change. And you got to just be honest and say, right now, Satan is ruling this earth, man. And it will be a spiritual battle to change that. Have no doubt.
I have no doubt about it. Darren just sent me an email. He said, Richie, thanks for your humility in accepting that Dean might be right about supporting Sanders. Darren, I'll tell you this. I've been doing radio for 18 years, producing people and presenting on television. I have never, ever said that I know the answer to anything. I have opinions, and I specifically invite people on who have different opinions to me, but people whom I have a lot of respect for. We've had people on here talking about free market capitalism. They've been great guests because they're very nice people and they really believe in it. That's what it's all about. It's what you don't get in the independent media. In a lot of independent media programs, you get people who come on with one another and they agree with everything. It's not only is it boring, but it doesn't get you anywhere. I admire Dean's passion for Sanders because Sanders has said things that are worth supporting. They absolutely are, as Corbyn has. I get frustrated when, these guys get close to power and then, things don't happen. But nobody says anybody's right or anybody's wrong.
No, you could be totally right, just to be, fair, because it's just my opinion too. And same for me, I don't know nothing, man. That's just what I think and dig it. But it's good. But yeah, that's the next, maybe place to go is just like you're talking this wage slavery stuff. Well, okay, I'm not that way. I'm obviously, my website is left hook, so that it's not right hook.
Yeah.
So I am my thing is I come from the revolutionary tradition. I think when I got into college and really young, and then I got more into the conspiracy genre. But it's hard to bring a lot of people along with you from where I came from because it's dominated kind of by the right wingers like Jones and and there's just not a left wing. There's not a lot of left wing conspiracy writers.
No.
But it's cool because I feel like I have been kind of a bridge. I'm the same as you. Like most of the people probably have subscribed to my blog. I got 7,000 people following it, and probably most of them are right wingers. And that's fine.
That's good because they're getting
great. Whatever.
Yeah, I admire them for that.
But what my thing is you got to be an adult. You got to have a mixed economy. We had a post office and a police force and a National Guard right when we started this country. That was socialism. Public libraries, socialism. National Forest, socialism. That's what it is. What it is. And then capitalism dominates most everything and has increasingly dominated everything since Reagan in this country, even Carter really. And they've privatized everything. You got to pay to get on a hiking trail in Washington now. You got to pay to get a library card now. There's no public commons left. and where to go. So what I think is it's gone too far the other way. Obviously, nobody wants to live under, some kind of Stalinist North Korean junta or whatever, but you don't have to. I mean, you just got to think smart. And you look at countries like Norway that are sort of a mixed economy. They're doing pretty good. Highest standard of living in the world. I wish they'd get rid of their king. Yeah, that's true. But, there's just got to be an adult conversation about, who's going to pay the taxes to fund the roads, the schools, the health care? Who's going to pay it? Well, right now, ever since Reagan, the middle class in America has been paying it because he cut taxes on the rich dramatically. Then Bush cut them again, and Clinton cut them in between. And, when Richard Nixon was president in 1972, people don't realize it. The super elite, the Rothschild Rockefeller types, paid a 72% income tax in the U.S. Now they're paying like 26% or something.
Right.
That's where the money went. That's the debt. See, and so increasingly, and that doesn't even count cigarette taxes, beer taxes, local sales taxes, property taxes. So if you look at the bigger studies, it just shows how massively the middle class and the lower class, by the way, pay for everything. So the real scenario is you have this elite bunch of pigs who don't just feed at the public trough, they own the public trough. And that's the biggest lie of all, really, in America anyway, because everyone wants to blame the welfare mothers and the this and that, the little people, for getting these crumbs. Even welfare. Look who gets the money. Ralston, Purina, General Mills, the food companies, the grocery chains. Yeah. That's who really gets
the
money.
GMO companies, yeah.
Right? Yeah. So you follow the money and you always find out these guys got some way of pocketing that money. And that's the problem. That's the system you're describing that's messed up and does.
But as you've gone into in your books, the minute you take the creation of money away from gangsters and you put it back into the hands of the people and you fund public initiatives through money that you create that is debt-free, money that doesn't have any, interest attached to it, and you say, right, I'm Dean Henderson, I'm the president, or I'm Richie Allen, I'm the president. I'm going to fund all these infrastructure projects because I'm going to print the money to do it. It's not going to be taxed. It's not going to be any interest, and I'm going to give it to firms to do what needs to be done. That's automatically going to regenerate those communities because those people are going to be spending money in those communities and they're going to need people to work. And when I said this to Jeff Berwick, and I like Jeff, but he's a free market capitalist, Jeff said, it's nonsense, man. It's absolutely not. And Jeff is a believer in let the market sort it all out. And of course, no, that's happening at the moment. That's what happens now.
Yeah, exactly. That's the status quo, and that's where we went wrong. But it's just gotten so right wing out there, not just in America, but I think in the whole world. We just went really hard to the right. And there was all these pronunciations, that socialism was dead, after the wall fell, and people believed it. There's only one way to go. And it was all just a bunch of lies. In retrospect, it just caused the biggest concentration of economic power that the world's ever seen is what it caused, ever. And that's not good. So we're back to comparing to the 1890s and the robber barons. I mean, we're back in that sort of state where, the private sector simply not going to produce these manufacturing jobs. I mean, when they can go to China, when they can still do this, but that can all be done too. We can put tariffs on Chinese goods. We can do all kinds of things to equalize that. But the government has to step in, and not just in America, but there has to be probably massive infrastructure programs in a lot of countries to get this economy, to get people some good income and actually make things again, instead of shuffling papers, because everything right now is service industry, whether it's McDonald's or Goldman Sachs whatever it is, it's not producing anything. This is the thing. So you can't expect much good to happen when you just quit producing things and sit on Facebook all day.
It's just a death economy. I could speak to you all night, but we're just out of time. Folks, I want to give a huge plug again to hendersonlefthook.wordpress.com. That's where Dean's great books are: Big Oil and Their Bankers in the Persian Gulf, 4 Horsemen, 8 Families and Their Global Intelligence, The Grateful Unriches, they're sticking it to the Matrix and the Federal Reserve Cartel. I will not leave it as long to invite you back on again, my friend. It's a real pleasure getting your opinion on these things. And I mean this from the bottom of my heart. For you, I hope Bernie Sanders has a big night in New York today.
Yeah, that's great. Hey, thanks so much for having me, Richie. Take care of yourself, and hopefully good things are going to start happening. We can turn this thing around.
Well, you're doing great work, Dean. Thank you very much, my friend. You too. The great Dean Henderson on the line to us from Missouri.